Well, as is prone to happen, I got cut off before I was done talking. But we were looking at the U.S. Department of Education site. And rather than go back there, let me just say that I think you should poke around a little bit more, see what's available, try to find some grants that might be relevant to the project or the program that your grant proposal team is thinking about having funded, or that you're personally interested in. This is a way for you to think about what might be available for you moving forward. I also want to encourage you to visit the Institute for Education Sciences website. This is particularly good for large grants that focus on U.S. education. We have several faculty in the College of Education at Lehigh who have won significantly large IES grants. And so we'll have an opportunity to interact with people who have been through the IES process as we move forward in this class, and it'd be good if you knew a little background on that. The National Science Foundation is also a great place to look, and let me just shift this down a little. If you look at the social, behavioral, and economic sciences program area, you'll be more likely to find funding that's relevant for comparative and international education. So do give that a shot, do see what's available, and I think you'll be pretty pleased with the different pieces of information that you can find online from just these 4 government grant opportunities. If you're looking for state level grant opportunities, I've listed a couple. It's relatively easy to find these as well if you're from a different state or you want to look at a different particular focus area or region in the U.S. I've listed the links for the Pennsylvania and the New Jersey Departments of Education and giving you some information on what you should click on to get to the relevant section. Every state has a slightly different website. They have a slightly different way of proposing or making opportunities for grant proposals available. So there's no standard way to do this. It's going to be different for every state. You can get information on Pennsylvania and New Jersey relatively easily, but just so you know that it differs from state to state. The other thing to be aware of is that state departments of education are usually interested in some sort of practical or applied program proposal. They're not so interested in research-related proposals for the most part. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, so there probably is an exception to that rule, but I do want you to be aware of that moving forward. There are lots of other funding sources that are available as well. For example, foundations and other types of grant opportunities are probably where at least half or more of the money that's out there will come from. The Foundation Center is one that's talked about in your book quite a bit. It is one of those sites that in the past 5 to 10 years has become much more of a subscriber site. So you have to be subscribed to get particular information from the Foundation Center's website. However, if you try the Foundation Directory Online free, let me get my pointer back. There we go. Foundation Directory Online free when you go to the Foundation Center website. That is a way to look for foundations, and you look for foundations based on what they're interested in or what they say that their goals are, and you're trying to see if that aligns with what your goals are, what your program or project objectives are. The University of Wisconsin has a very good grants information collection online. There are a couple of restrictions. It's not all open to you unless you are a University of Wisconsin faculty member or student. I am not. In all likelihood, if you're watching this, you are not. And so there are going to be places that we can't get to because we are not affiliated with the University of Wisconsin and we don't have login or passwords that will get us there. However, they also have some information that is freely available. And so, as I suggest here, poke around and see what you can access. There is going to be some good information there. It is still a great repository of information. It's just going to be a little hit or miss in terms of what you have access to. And then finally, in terms of university-related resources, Lehigh University has a page on finding funding, and there's some pretty good information right here in our own backyard. I encourage you to take a look at this website, specifically looking at the external funding opportunities page within there to see what funding opportunities are available outside of Lehigh. Now, there's some internal funding opportunities that are also really good, and I would love to talk to you about which of those might be right for you or your project, but I think we should do that on a one-to-one basis because we're really, for this class, trying to focus on external funding opportunities and not ways to get funded within the university itself. There are also some other places to look. There's a Michigan State also has another university-based source of information that has a lengthy list of potential funders for both individuals, for individuals in particular. It's well worth a look. You should take a look at that and make sure that you take a look at that. FundsNet Services, very long URL here. This link will take you to a list of many international foundations that fund programs and projects. This is really unique. There aren't a lot of information sources that focus on international opportunities, and given that we're taking a comparative and international education approach to this, I think that you will find this especially helpful. Please note that the trick is that you often have to work with an international organization or agency in order to apply. In other words, you couldn't apply just as someone affiliated with Lehigh University. You'd either have to partner with the organization abroad, or you'd have to go through and just apply directly to that organization and be working with them. So you have to think about where you're going to be, who you're affiliated with, how that's going to work. Now, choosing a funder. This is going to be a question, obviously, that your proposal teams are going to try to answer. And so there are a couple of things that I want you to consider as you're meeting with your teams this week in terms of how you're going to really solidify which funder is the best opportunity for you. So first of all, you have to ask, I don't know why it's not drawing over there. Anyway, do your program or project needs match the funding priorities of the grant maker? All right. This is the aligning mission thing, although it goes a little more in detail. One of the things to think about is your target group within the scope of the request for proposals? In other words, if you are specifically interested in working with disadvantaged mixed race students in the Western Cape of South Africa, then you better be sure that that target group is within the scope of the RFP. For example, Hewlett-Packard, the Hewlett Foundation, does a lot of grant making in sub-Saharan Africa, but they often do not focus on South Africa because South Africa is considered to be one of the more developed sub-Saharan nations. They might focus on Malawi or Tanzania or Kenya or some of the others, but they wouldn't necessarily focus on South Africa. So make sure that your target group is within the scope of the RFP. Second of all, you want to make sure and see if there is any evidence that that grant maker funds proposals like yours. And the way that you do that is you look at what they have funded previously. This will be available on each grant maker's or each foundation's or each whatever's website. It will usually be available there for all to see. There often are also annual reports that funding organizations will put out. In those annual reports, they will list who they funded and how much they funded them for and for what period. And often there's an abstract of the funded proposal that's available. So do your research and make sure that there's evidence that the grant maker will fund proposals like yours and that the target group is within the scope of the RFP, as well as aligning that mission, which is a larger part of what you're going to be doing this week. Next, will the grant maker provide the amount of funding that you need? So you need to have some sort of an idea of what your estimated requested funding will be and whether or not that will fit within the range or at least the maximum of funding per year that the grant maker will provide. Many grant makers will limit the amount of money they will give for particular RFPs. Let's say they limit it to $20,000. Right? If your program at a minimum will cost more than that, let's say it costs $50,000, and in this RFP says they only fund up to $20,000, there's no point in applying. That is not a good fit. Right? There's something that you need that they can't provide. Second of all, will the grant maker fund the kinds of expenses that you expect to request? For example, personnel, it's often a very large cost. Equipment, which is not such a big thing for social scientists, but it is for hard science folks. Travel, big deal for us, and other sorts of things that you might need, software, conference expenses. Sometimes it costs to print things up, just basic materials that you might need in order to implement surveys, things like that. So take a look. They will always, almost always, specify the kinds of things that they do fund and the kinds of things that they don't fund. And sometimes they will fund personnel and travel. Sometimes they won't fund travel, but they will do equipment. I mean, there are all different combinations, and it depends on what each individual funder values. Finally, does the grant maker fund your kind of organization? If you're representing a university, if you're going as a person affiliated with Lehigh University, does the grant maker fund universities or institutions of higher education? If not, do they fund nonprofit organizations? Or do they only fund NGOs? Or do they only fund individuals? Make sure that they will fund you. Otherwise, why are you applying? Next, make sure you read the guidelines along with the RFP. It's often very dry reading, but you want to make sure that you have read all of the guidelines and that you know where to go back if you need to check up on something. If you're unsure after reading the guidelines whether your program or project is right for a particular funder, particular grant maker, then contact them and ask them. You can do that via email, you can call them, those are really the two ways, but make sure that you are in touch with them. It's okay to ask questions. And finally, or not finally, but next, read the instructions provided by the grant maker. They're usually very specific about the order of things, how they want things presented to them, whether or not you have to submit a letter of inquiry before you can actually submit a proposal application. You also want to see if there are particular questions or items that are on the application that you might not be able to answer. If you can't or won't be able to answer every question or cover every topic that the grant maker wants, then this isn't the right grant for you. Right? Just keep that in mind. What I recommend that you do is that you take a close look at this USAID Development Innovation Ventures example. This will show you their annual program statement, which is like an RFP for them. And you can see what their funding priorities are, what their funding limits are, what their eligibility requirements are, etc. Since the USAID Development Innovation Ventures is one of the potential funders that you can apply to for your final grant proposal project for this class, this is a great example to look at. Just take a look at it, download it and take a look at it and see what the requirements are and whether or not it matches what you're thinking about doing as a team. All right, the next section, the next screencast, I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about aligning missions and move forward from there.